What's that?
In May 1990, Jan Cornell, a hardworking hospital employee and loving mother, entrusted her 11-year-old daughter to the care of a close friend, hoping for a rare and much-needed evening break. But when she returned home at dawn, she walked into a scene that no parent should ever witness, a brutal, haunting crime that had unfolded in her absence, leaving her daughter and her friend as its tragic victims. Local law enforcement threw everything they had into the case. Officers combed through leads, conducted endless interviews, and canvassed the neighborhood. Yet the person responsible remained a shadow, a faceless figure who left no easy trail. The case seemed destined for the cold case files, nearly forgotten. But over 25 years later, forensic technology took an unexpected leap, offering a renewed sense of hope. The passage of time had degraded some evidence, and memories had grown murky, raising the stakes in a case that had long felt out of reach. Still, with fresh leads from these technological advances, the question hung heavy. Could this long-awaited breakthrough finally lead to justice for Jan and her community? Let's dive in. It was a balmy and seasonably warm 80 degrees at 10:30 p.m. in Cape Coral, Florida on May 9, 1990. For Jan Cornell, who lived in the Courtyards Apartments condominium community, it felt like any other night. Jan, a single mother of two, lived with her youngest daughter, 11-year-old Robin. She worked at Cape Coral Hospital alongside her close friend, 32-year-old Lisa Story. Earlier that day, Jan had helped Lisa settle into her spare room. When Jan's boyfriend invited her to watch TV at his place, Lisa offered to watch Robin. Around 10:30 p.m., Jan tucked Robin into bed, kissed her goodnight, and whispered, "I love you," before heading out, leaving one front door lock undone as it was not functioning. What was supposed to be a quick visit to her boyfriend's turned into an unexpected nap on his couch, and she didn't wake until 4 a.m., just minutes before her hospital shift began. Rushing home, she felt an eerie sense of dread as she neared the door, especially when faint footsteps echoed from inside. When Jan reached her front door, she realized both locks were secured, blocking her entry. She moved to the side patio, where she found the sliding door open and the kitchen light on. As she stepped inside, she noticed that photos of her two daughters had been taken from a shelf in the living room and arranged on an ironing board, a chilling detail that gave her goosebumps. Heart pounding, Jan raced upstairs, and what she saw left her terrified. Moments later, she called the police. In an interview with Cape Coral Police years later, Jan recalled what she experienced that fateful evening.
I actually found my daughter and my friend. I had been out for the evening, and when I returned home, there was an issue with my door, and I couldn't get in my front door, so I went around to the slider, and the slider was open. So I entered through the slider and got an eerie feeling at that time. Actually, I thought I was walking into my house being broken into. And I went up the stairs, and when I went up the stairs, the first thing I saw was my daughter, and she was in my bedroom. And out of the corner of my eye from the landing, I could see Lisa, and she was still in her bed. And then that's when my mind just was going 100 miles an hour trying to figure out what is going on here. And I, called 911 and tried to resuscitate Robin. And in my mind, I knew she was gone. She was cold. She was a little hard, and I knew that she was gone, but I still thought maybe I'd get a miracle. And I kept screaming for Lisa. I didn't know at that time that she also was killed. I kept screaming for her to tell me what happened here, what's going on, and I'm on the phone with 911 with Robin, screaming for Lisa. And then the police got there, and and here we are. The police got there and kind of invaded and to start their investigation. I think probably looking back on it, even though I remember every detail, I think maybe I was in shock. Because intelligently, like I said, I knew she was gone, but I just couldn't process how, why, who, what happened here.
Police arrived shortly after Jan's 911 call and stepped into a grim scene. Both Lisa and Robin had been asphyxiated, and Robin's tiny body had been disturbingly positioned. Whoever was responsible had even taken time to remove family photos from a shelf and arrange them on the ironing board, a move Jan felt was intended to send a message, though its meaning remained unclear. Police determined that the suspect took several items belonging to Lisa, including her driver's license, credit cards, checkbook, and a new wristwatch she'd purchased as a gift. None of these items have ever been recovered. They also found a pair of unfamiliar white socks on a dining chair and a Toyota keychain left on Jan's TV. Detectives believe the keys may have been left behind by the perpetrator. Investigators recovered a complete DNA profile from bodily fluids, as well as blonde hair from the scene, and identified the suspect as a white male with type O blood. They swabbed and interviewed numerous individuals, checked traffic records for Toyota stops around the time of the crime, and worked hundreds of tips, yet all leads led to dead ends. Detectives would spend the next 15 years meticulously reviewing evidence, pursuing any angle that might lead to a suspect. They investigated everyone close to Jan and Lisa, including interviewing every resident in the 140-unit Courtyards North complex and surrounding streets. Investigators narrowed their list of persons of interest to 10 individuals, including a man reported as a peeping Tom who had moved to Mississippi shortly after the tragedy. His ex-girlfriend had reported unusual behavior following the incident, but despite the suspicious timing, he was ultimately ruled out. The case later aired twice on America's Most Wanted, drawing national attention. First on January 21, 2006, and again on July 28, 2007. As a result, many tips poured in. Cape Coral Police even brought in a retired NYPD detective, Fidel Balan, on a 6-month contract dedicated to the case. But despite Balan's efforts, the case remained unsolved. In 2009, Florida passed a groundbreaking DNA collection law. Under this legislation, anyone charged with a felony, not just convicted, could have their DNA sampled. The goal? To widen the net for potential criminal suspects and ensure the innocent were exonerated. Many years later, Jan continued to hold on to the hope that the person responsible would one day face justice.
I'm not giving up. I'm not going away. I'm not giving up. And thankfully, I've been able to keep the Cape Coral Police Department on board with my promise. I told them all about my promise. I promised the day I had to say goodbye that for as long as I was alive, I would never stop looking for who hurt them. And like I said, I've managed to establish a relationship and keep the Cape Coral Police on board. And they're still looking as well. We'll just keep doing this as long as, we can reach out and ask people, because I'm convinced in my heart and soul that someone still in this community may have knowledge of who did this crime, and they keep holding back, and every year I say, it's time, please come forward. They're not helping themselves by keeping this to themselves. If anybody knows anything, which, like I said, in my heart and soul, I'm convinced someone knows, they need to come forward to the police department, and they need to help bring justice to this case.
Jan did her best to move forward despite the tragedy, eventually marrying the boyfriend she had visited on the night of the homicides. Though she had taken his last name, she requested to be publicly identified as Cornell to protect their safety. In 2016, the Cape Coral Police Department launched a paid social media campaign to broaden their search for leads. They also placed billboards throughout Southwest Florida. Then, in September 2016, more than 25 years after the murders, the department held a press conference to announce new information.
Last week, the Cape Coral Police Department detectives were notified of a CODIS database hit on DNA taken from a recent arrestee at the Lee County Jail that matched the suspect's DNA samples from the Cornell story case. Over the last several days, detectives worked tirelessly in interviewing this arrestee and obtaining a body warrant for additional samples to confirm the initial CODIS hit. The Law&Crime Lab, who has been instrumental in this case over the last 26 years, expedited this testing. Detectives from our Investigative Services Bureau have been in constant contact with the State Attorney's Office since this discovery. It is my pleasure to tell you that today, an arrest warrant was served on Joseph Zieler, last name spelling Z-I-E-L-E-R, white male, date of birth of 4/15/1962, for the murders of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story. We got him.
I've just dreamt about this day, never knowing if it was ever going to happen, but I never lost faith, and I never lost hope that someday we would all know who killed my beautiful daughter and Susan's sister, Lisa. Well, we all know that miracles exist. I feel in my heart that there is a God because I prayed for this day every day for 26 years and could never let it go, how he tortured and killed my baby and my friend. And I thank every one of these men standing in this room for listening to me and for not arresting me for stalking them for 26 years. I cannot be more grateful today. I cannot be more happy. I want my daughter and my friend to finally rest in peace.
1 month before the announcement, 54-year-old Joseph Zieler of North Fort Myers got into a heated argument with his eldest son in which he shot and injured his son with a pellet gun. The incident led to his arrest on charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Since the charge is a second-degree felony, it triggered a DNA swab as per the 2009 DNA collection law. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement notified Cape Coral Police when Zieler's DNA returned a hit on the computer software database known as CODIS. Additional DNA from Zieler was obtained and tested. Those results linked him to DNA found at the scene of the Cornell Story murders decades earlier. Zieler, who was 28 at the time of the double homicide, was charged with 2 counts of sexual battery, 1 count of burglary, and 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was held in custody without bail pending trial and faced the death penalty. Zieler made his initial court appearance for the murder charges the day after his arrest. However, due to a range of procedural hurdles, legal maneuvers, and logistical challenges typical of complex decades-old cases, it would be 6 years before the trial of Joseph Zieler finally began.
Jury selection starts this morning in the trial of the man accused of killing an 11-year-old and a babysitter in Cape Coral. Joseph Zieler is charged with the double homicide. It happened more than 30 years ago.
Prosecutors were confident they had a strong case for conviction and the death penalty. They claimed body fluids found on the bedsheet where Robin was sleeping matched Zieler's to a frequency of over 1 in 700 billion. Additionally, they would hear testimony from Zieler's longtime girlfriend, who had started dating him the same month as the murders and broke up with him after his arrest. When asked about Zieler's preferences for intimacy, she described the same position in which Robin was found posed. Also, she refuted Zieler's prior claims of memory problems related to a motorcycle accident, saying that she never observed any such issues during their 26-year relationship. Zieler's legal team would offer a range of defenses, including challenging the DNA evidence, an alternate suspect, and claiming the defendant was out of town when the crime occurred. Opening arguments were heard on May 16, 2023.
Before the CODIS hit, the defendant gets arrested for an unrelated charge. But the result of that is his mouth is swabbed for DNA. And that DNA is put into CODIS. That's how we get the match. At the time of the murders, he's living in Cape Coral, and he works at Marine Concepts of Cape Coral, which is very close to Jan's house. So in September of 2016, the day after the CODIS hit, CCPD brings Joseph Zieler there to talk to him. And from the word go, he is evasive. He tells them that in 1998, he had a motorcycle accident and has no memory of anything that happened the 8 years before that. Doesn't know his parents' name, doesn't know if he's ever even been to Cape Coral. He knows nothing. He makes it sound like he's completely helpless after this motorcycle accident, has no memory, and his girlfriend Bonnie has to take care of him because he's almost an invalid. And when confronted with the murders, he knows nothing. He doesn't know the people, the places. He has no memory. But you're also going to hear a statement that he gave to law enforcement in August when he was originally arrested on that unrelated crime. And he knows facts and can answer questions. He told them how he used to work in Cape Coral and has been with Bonnie for almost 26 years, and how he knows where he was the day his son was born in 1991. You're going to hear directly from the defendant's mouth and phone calls that he makes to Bonnie. He's instructing her how to get a bondsman and put up the house for collateral, sell off his possessions, how she can become his power of attorney. Clearly someone that is capable of taking care of themselves. There are two different Joseph Zielers, the one you meet before being confronted with the murders and the one after.
Gentlemen,
Good morning.
my privilege and pleasure to represent Mr. Zieler here today along with Mr. Hollander. My opening statements can be short because, in all candor, we don't have to prove anything. It's the state's burden of proof in this case. We don't have to disprove anything. Mr. Zieler, if he elects to testify, may testify, or he may not testify. If he doesn't testify, you can't hold that against him because he's exercising his constitutional right. And you told us early on that you wouldn't hold that against him, that you wouldn't consider it, you wouldn't consider what he might have said had he taken the stand. But ultimately, it's his choice, and we will discuss that once the state rests their case. Cape Coral Police Department, when they investigated this, literally went out and interviewed hundreds of people. They interviewed them, they took DNA from a lot of them, they took hair samples from a lot of them. What should be significant to you, though, is they didn't talk to Mr. Zieler, they didn't take any DNA from Mr. Zieler, they didn't take any hair from Mr. Zieler until 26 years later. And why was that? Because he was not on their radar. He was not a suspect in this case. Jan Cornell couldn't provide any real assistance to the Cape Coral Police Department about Joseph Zieler because he was basically nobody at that point in time. There's a lot of physical evidence that you will entertain, and I agree with the counsel. Some of it gets used up in testing. There were dozens and dozens of hair samples taken from inside the apartment. There were fingerprints, there were footprints. Obviously, there were other body samples that were taken from inside the apartment, supporting the fact that there were many people who had been through the apartment.
On the trial's opening day, Robin's mother, Jan Cornell, took the stand. After 3 decades, she faced the harrowing task of revisiting the tragic night, examining crime scene photos, and recounting distressing details.
When I came into the room and I found her, I immediately touched her and screamed her name, of course, and she was cold. And
at that point, did you recognize that she was dead?
I did.
What did you do next?
I started giving her CPR.
Did you change the position that she was in?
I did. I moved her.
Did you move her to that position that we saw in Exhibit 44?
Yes, I did.
So the position you moved her into was then on her back?
Yes.
Did you actually perform CPR?
Yes, I did.
What did you notice when you started CPR?
That she had a lot of congestion, like she had really been crying.
Congestion from where?
Who knows? But then when I gave her breath, I could hear her lungs aspirate. And I knew she was dead then.
What did you do next?
I actually was doing that while I had 911 coming to help me.
So did you make contact with 911?
I did.
Did you stay with Robin until the police arrived?
I did.
During Zieler's cross-examination, prosecutors questioned him about letters he had sent to Jan Cornell a year earlier. These letters would eventually lead to charges of witness intimidation against Zieler.
Letter is coming, says Joseph Adam Zieler at the top, and then there's more, but that's the first part.
Yes.
And what are the numbers 47492/835775
That's my ID number followed by my booking number.
at the Lee County Jail?
Yes.
And the address of 2115 MLK Boulevard, Main Jail, Fort Myers, 33901, that's where you're being housed.
Yes.
And that letter was addressed to who, sir?
J.G. Batista and family.
At what, who, did you address this envelope?
Yes.
And who was J.G. Batista and family?
Well, I thought it was Jenny Gal Batista.
Oh, so you were trying to send this letter to Robin's sister then?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Yes. I was trying to send it to family, actually. So I guess I was trying to send it to everybody.
The whole Batista family?
Yes.
And in that particular letter, did you profess your innocence by claiming that it was a relative of yours that did this murder?
Yes, I was trying to defend myself because no one would listen to me.
Sir, it calls for a yes or no. Did you, in the letter, profess your innocence or allege your innocence by saying that a relative of yours had done these murders?
Yes.
Did you suggest, in addition to that, did you tell the people who this letter's addressed to that you slept with Jan Cornell, Janice, and a friend of hers in 1989, and therefore that's why your DNA is in the Courtyards North condominium?
Yes, I thought so because she didn't wash her sheets.
You know whether or not Miss Cornell washes her sheets?
How I got that is by the information I was given from you was discovery, and I thought that the only way my DNA could have gotten there was me sleeping with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller.
Did you sleep with Jan Cornell and Miss Deller?
It's possible because I was here.
Well, now you were here.
I mean, I was here in December of '89. I testified to that earlier. And what I believe happened is I slept with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller, and they were just too much of a pig not to wash their sheets.
And during your direct exam by counsel, your attorney, you indicate you'd never been in their condominium.
I'm speculating that the only way my DNA could have got in there is if I slept with them during December '89 while I was here for the month of December.
And then it would have to follow that your DNA would have stayed viable
For
let me finish my question. For if it was January, February, March, April, May of 1990, and then, well, okay, I don't want to make it a compound question. Your DNA would have still been there 5 months later.
Yes.
And that's because they're pigs and they don't wash their sheets,
Exactly.
right? You know that?
Well, I assume that, just like you're assuming that
But just so the record's clear, when I said they're pigs and they wash their sheets, that's what you said.
Absolutely.
All right. And sitting in jail, pending charges on this case, you thought that this was appropriate to send the 11-year-old who was murdered's mother.
Well, nobody would listen to me, so I was trying to defend myself. Can I speak?
No, sir. Wait for a question, please.
May I retrieve the exhibit?
Go ahead.
Approach with exhibit 312.
312.
Take a moment to look at that letter, please. Was the previous exhibit admitted? Move to admit 311 if I didn't. Okay.
311 is admitted.
Sir, on the second page, that which shows the envelope which was sent to, again, J.G. Batista and addressed from Joseph Adam Zieler with the same numbers. Is that also a letter you wrote?
I concede I wrote all this.
And in this second letter, you told you directed this towards Jan Cornell, correct? And when you said this.
I can't say unless you show me the letter.
I am. I'm going to direct you to the page right now, page 3. So it's the page right after the envelope picture. On the second paragraph. Did you address to Jan Cornell the following? The only way, underlined, is to admit you possibly could have slept with me as a night encounter and you can't remember, you won't be sure, you won't retest. Did you?
Hold on a second.
Okay.
I don't see Jan Cornell's name above that. You said Jan Cornell's name was there on
No,
that
I
page.
said, who were you, I'll ask it this way. Who were you addressing when you made that statement? Is there someone else in the Batista family you slept with? According to you?
Let the witness answer the question before you ask another question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, yes.
Yes to what?
I don't know. Ask it again.
All right. I'm going to ask it open-ended. It's
All right.
right? A very open-ended question. When you made that statement in the letter, who were you directing that
Jan
to?
Cornell, I was trying to get her to ask to retest NB32A because it doesn't contain my DNA. I don't believe it is.
You've been sitting here for the last 2.5 days, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you hear the testimony of who was it that retested?
Jim Pollock.
Of Jim Pollock. Was it Jim Pollock?
Jim Pollock. It was
The retest.
That Ortigan, Vicky Molino,
All right.
all of them.
Well, the DNA witnesses, did you hear them say that they actually did retest NB32? That they actually took the sheet, recut another sample, and had another analyst do the same test? Did you hear that?
Yes.
So the retesting was done.
I believe FDLE is siding with the prosecution. Of course they're going to say that.
Okay, and their opinion on that was that Jan Cornell was excluded from that DNA.
I don't think she was. I think that if it was listed, that's the reason I asked for it to be retested, because I don't believe that.
Now, if you flip the page for me and you go to the 4th page of this pack, of that exhibit, and I'm going to ask you to look at the bottom. Did you also direct this to Jan Cornell? If you knowingly allow them to convict the wrong man out of spite and vengeance, I will drag this parentheses, and you, Robin and Lisa, through appeals all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely. I wrote that.
And did you also write on the next line, I'm innocent, I will prove it, no matter how long it takes. Do you really want the rest of your life spent in court?
Yes, I wrote that.
You're threatening then Miss Cornell with what you're going to do. Should she not? What do you want her to do?
Well, she's calling me a rapist and a murderer, so what? I can't write that. I mean, she called me a rapist and a murderer, and I'm calling her a pig for not washing her sheets. It's a paper right here that they're trying to hide from you.
Mr.
Right
Zieler.
Here. I still see the body of 11-year-old
Mr.
Robin
Zieler.
Cornell with the hair of her killer.
The jury will step out.
The blonde hair.
Mr. Zieler, the effort you've made to introduce evidence that was not previously placed before the jury is an improper action by you, sir. The document has been handed to your counsel. When I ask you to respond to the questions that are given, that is not an invitation for you to give a narrative or a soliloquy or your entire personal belief about your prosecution. You have made yourself a witness in this matter, and as such, must comport with the rules of court. Do you understand?
Yes.
Is that in any way unclear? Is that in any way unclear, Mr. Zieler?
No.
I will ask counsel, did you have a discussion with Mr. Zieler about the potential for contempt if there are further breaches?
No. Conversation about contempt related to whether he was going to testify when we came back before.
If you continue to act in this manner, I will have contempt proceedings. Is that clear?
Yes.
Bring the jury back in.
During her closing arguments, prosecutor Stephanie Russell told the jury that the case was straightforward. DNA evidence directly implicated Joseph Zieler as the murderer. Defense attorney Lee Hollander countered that the presence of blonde hair at the crime scene and the extreme violence of the act suggested a personal motive. Given that Jan and the defendant had no known previous connection, he indicated that another individual was the true culprit. On May 18, 2023, after several hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit in Fort Lee County, Florida, the state of Florida versus Joseph Adam Zieler in case number 16 CF 455, verdict. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder of Robin Cornell. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder of Lisa Story. So say we all, signed on May the 18th, 2023, by the foreperson.
Any requests from the defense? Ladies and gentlemen, please listen very carefully to my question. I'm going to go through your juror numbers. I'm going to ask each of you the same question.
5 weeks later, after the jury had voted by a 10-2 margin to recommend death for Joseph Zieler, all parties returned to court to hear Judge Branding's ruling. However, just a few hours before the decision, Zieler motioned to his public defender to indicate he had something private he wanted to share with him.
What's that?
All right. I ain't gonna talk to you. Relax. I'm calm.
Shirley, are you okay?
I'm fine.
I am relaxed. I'm calm. Relax.
I used to box. I've taken a lot better shots than that.
Yeah, well, relax. I ain't doing nothing to you.
The court's review of other capital cases has led the court to conclude that the death penalty would be a proportionate sentence in this case. Therefore, the court concludes that under the laws of the state of Florida, the defendant has forfeited his right to live. Accordingly, it is ordered and adjudged that the defendant, Joseph Adam Zieler, is hereby sentenced to death for the murder of Robin Cornell and the murder of Lisa Story. The defendant is committed to the custody of the State of Florida Department of Corrections for the execution of this sentence as provided by law. The defendant is hereby notified that this conviction and sentence are subject to automatic review by the Florida Supreme Court. Any objection from the state to the court's statements?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection from the defense to the court statements?
No, sir.
Mr. Zieler, that is the sentence and judgment of the court. Stand over to be fingerprinted. You are remanded to the custody of the sheriff for transport to the Department of Corrections.
First of all, I'd like to thank this, because without this, we wouldn't all be here. The dedication, the compassion, the hard work, the everything that was put in, it's nothing like TV, I promise you. Nothing. But nothing can take the place of hearing the words today that justice for Robin and justice for Lisa has happened. He has received the ultimate punishment that the state of Florida can give, which is the death penalty. He will never see a free moment. He will never hurt another individual on this earth. For that, I cannot be more grateful. And again, I have to go back to this team, all of them, who have stood by me for years during some very dark moments. And thank you for always giving me respect and letting me be a voice for my daughter and my friend, because I have done it, and I hope very proudly. I love them both, and I never, ever want anyone to forget either one of them. They were here, they lived. Some evil monster cut their lives so short, so unfair. But now they have peace, and now we can let them have peace. Just thank everyone, all of you.
Like Jan said, I'd like to thank the Cape Coral Police Department, all the particular individuals that hung with this case so long, to the prosecution team, to the administrators that did their job, to the investigators that went day after day, year after year, never giving up hope. Thanks to all of them. Thanks to the system that it worked. Thanks to everybody that showed support to me, my family, Lisa's family. It was a long, hard road. Words can't express the gratitude that I feel. I hope that Lisa and Robin have a little bit more of a smile on their face today.
For 26 years, Jan Cornell bore the haunting weight of her daughter Robin's and friend Lisa's stories' unsolved murders. Each day since that dark night in 1990, she was consumed by grief and the relentless drive for justice. In a testament to a mother's boundless love, Jan clung to every glimmer of hope, notably the breakthroughs in forensic technology. And when the justice system finally arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced Joseph Zieler, it didn't just shed light on a chilling past. It restored a small measure of faith to those who needed it most.